Okay, this is common factoring and factor by grouping. So two lessons today. We'll combine them both together because they're very closely related to each other. Common factoring first, key idea, dividing out the largest common number or letters from each term. Now sometimes you'll divide out numbers only, sometimes you'll divide out letters only, and sometimes you'll divide out both. So we'll go through some examples here and work our way through. Common factoring of the first one, we've got 6y minus 8. You'll see that we've got some common numbers that we can divide out. They're both even numbers here, so we'll divide out a 2, but no common letters. So let's start. If I divide out 2 from the first term, I'm left with 3. And no y to divide out there, no letters, so that's just going to remain exactly the same. And divide out 2 from the second term, and I'm left with a 4. And that's it. You can check your work as always by multiplying back into the brackets. So 2 times 3y for 6y, and 2 times negative 4 is negative 8, and we're done. That's it for the first one. Next part, again, just work your way through the question. Look for any common numbers first, and then look for any common letters that can be divided out. In this case here, we can divide out 2 from each of the terms. And secondly, if I scan through the letters here, there's an A here, but no A's here, so we won't divide out that. But we do have a B here and a B here, so definitely a common B in both terms. And no C here, one C here, so no common C, just the B's to be divided out. So if I write that common factor first, I've got a 2 from each term that can be divided out, a B as well, and then actually go ahead and do that division. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. No A's to divide out, it stays exactly where it is. B divided by B. Now you can subtract the exponents if you'd like when you're dividing. 1 subtract 1 is 0. There's no B's to be written here in that first term. Second term, 2 divided by 2 is 1. You can write the 1 or not, that's up to you. B divided by B. Now again, you can write the exponent here. 1 subtract 1 is 0. There's no B's to be written in the second part. And finally, no C's to be divided out, so that C stays exactly where it is, and that should be it. As always, check your work. So 2 times 2 is 4. A times B is AB. In the second part, 2 times 1 is 2. And then finally, B times C is BC. And that looks good. For C, scan through. We've got, for the numbers, at least a 4 that can be divided out in each term. And then for the x's, well, there's 2 x's here. There's 1 x here. You can write the 1 here if you'd like. So at least 1 x can be divided out from each term. So I'll write that common number first, write the common letter next, then actually go ahead and do that dividing. So if I divide this out, 8 divided by 4 is 2. Do the division of the x's. Now again, you can write the 1 here if you like. 2 subtract 1 is 1. There's 1 x left over here. And in the second part, divide out the number parts. Negative 4 divided by 4 is negative 1, but you can write the 1 or not, that's up to you. And secondly, 1 subtract 1 is 0. There's no x's, but I can write, in this case, x to the 0 or just a 1. And for part D, no numbers to be divided out here, all right? So we're just going to look at letters only. Now, if you go across here, you can see that we've got x's in both terms, we've got y's in both terms. A shortcut to dividing out the letters is always look for the lowest exponent. So if I've got a 2 on the x here and a 4 on the x here, the lowest exponent is a 2, so divide out the 2, x squared. And for the y's, I've got a 3 and a 2, so the lowest exponent there is a 2, so I will divide out y squared on that one. And then go ahead and do the division. Now again, you'll be using your exponent laws to divide out. So 2 subtract 2 is 0. There's no x's here. 3 subtract 2 is 1. There's 1 y left over. In the second part, 4 subtract 2 is 2, so it's x squared. And then 2 subtract 2 is 0. There's no y's left in the second part. And as always, just a quick mental check for yourself. Multiply it out, okay? Multiply into the brackets. X squared times well, there's no x's here, it's just x squared. Y squared times y, 2 plus 1 is 3, there's y cubed. For the x's, x squared times x squared is x to the exponent 4, and there's no y's to multiply out, it's just y squared, and that looks good. E, probably as complicated as you're going to get. There's lots of numbers and letters to deal with here, but the process is still exactly the same. You look at each part individually, start with your numbers, go through each letter, determine what is the common factor, and then go ahead and divide them out. So looking across the numbers here, a 3, a 12, and a 15. Looks like a 3 can be divided out in each term, so we'll start with that. Quickly scanning the letters, we've got x to the exponent 4, x to the exponent 5, x to the exponent 4, so 4 is the lowest exponent there, so I'll take out 4, or divide out 4 x's from each term. And for the y's, a 4, and a 4, and a 5, and again, the lowest exponent there is a 4, so we'll divide that out. Okay, now do the actual division. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 4 subtract 4 is 0, no x's. 4 subtract 4 is 0, no y's either. So just a 1 on the first part there. And negative 12 divided by 3 is negative 4, so we can write that number. 5 subtract 4 is 1, there's 1 x still left over. 4 subtract 4 is 0, no y's left there. And finally, negative 15 divided by 3 is negative 5. 4 subtract 4 is 0, no x's, and 5 subtract 4 is 1, so 1 y left over. As always, just mentally check your work here. 3x to the 4th, y to the 4th times 1 is the first term. 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. 4 plus 1 is 5 x's. 4 y's left here as well. And finally, 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. X to the 4th, there's no x's to multiply here, so that's good. And 4 plus 1 is 5, and that's good too. And like I said, really, that's as complicated as it's going to get here, okay? If you can divide out this common factor, then you should be okay for any common factoring question that I'm going to give you. Okay, something to be careful about when you are common factoring. Make sure that you do divide out the largest number from each of the terms and the largest number of letters as well. So I'll just go through each case separately. Over here you can see that we've got an 8, a 12, and a 16. You can divide out a 2 from each of those parts, so you'll be left with 4x squared plus 6x plus 8. But as you can see, there is still a common 2 that can be divided out from the remaining numbers. So the expectation is that you do divide out the largest number to be fully factored. So yes, this is an intermediary step, but it's not quite finished yet. We do need to write down a 4 here. Okay, we could immediately take out a 4 instead, come up with 2x squared plus 3x plus 4. And now you can see in this final answer, there are no more common numbers that can be divided out, and of course no common letters either. So that one now is fully factored. So if you make this intermediary step, make sure that you check your bracket here, make sure there's no other common factors that can be taken out. If there is, you need to factor them. If there's not, then you should be finished. Over here with letters, same thing. You can see I've got x's and y's in both terms here, but say for example you took out a common factor of 2x, you'd be left with x squared, sorry I should have, take out the y as well, I'll do that. So 2x and a y. Okay, if you do that you'll be left with x squared y to the 4th minus 3x cubed y squared. And you can see we still have common x's and y's in both terms. So that, again, like this case over here, needs to be factored further. The expectation is that you take out as many letters as you can from each term. So what should be divided out as the common factor would be 2x cubed and y cubed as well. You can always scan the exponents, look for the lowest exponent. You've got a 3 and a 4, so the lowest is a 3. So you're dividing out x cubed. And for the y, it's the same thing, a 5 and a 3, so the lowest is a 3. We'll divide that out as well. So as a final answer then, you're left with 3 minus 3 is 0, so there's no x's to be written here. 5 minus 3 is 2, so y squared, and then negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. 4 minus 3 is 1, there's one x left here, and 3 minus 3 is 0, there's no y's. Now again, if you look at the second bracket here, there's no common factors left over, no common numbers that can be divided out further, and no common letters, so that must mean that you are finished. This is factor by grouping. You can see from the idea here that it's closely related to common factoring. We're going to be using common factoring to do factor by grouping. What we need to do is divide the expression into groups first. Generally that will be groups of 2. Split it into a first half and a second half. And afterwards we're going to be doing some common factoring. You may need to rearrange those expressions first into different groups, but we'll have an example of that shortly. Okay, to factor here, you can see that the expression is has 4 terms, and what we're going to do is divide this into groups of 2. So I'll just divide this right down the middle here to begin with. So we've got the first half of the expression and the second half of the expression. What we want to do is common factor each part. So in the first part here, if I common factor, I can see I've got a common 2 that can be divided out. I also have a common x squared that can be divided out. And if I go ahead and divide that out, I'm left with x to begin with in the first part, and then a minus 3 in the second part. To finish this off, look at the second group now, and as well, we're going to be common factoring that. So if I look at the terms here for the second part, I've got a common negative 3 that can be divided out for each part, but no letters in that case. So if I divide them out, I've got a minus 3 here, and another x minus 3. Now you can check your work here as always, okay? 2x squared times x is 2x cubed. 2x squared times negative 3 is negative 6x squared, and negative 3 times x is negative 3x, minus 3 times minus 3 is positive 9. So it looks like we've got the common factoring done, and as you'll probably notice, we have matching brackets, which is a key part to factor by grouping. We want to make sure after we've done that first initial common factoring, we do have those matching brackets. If you do not have matching brackets, check your common factoring, or check that you may need to rearrange the expression to get those matching brackets. So do make sure in the second step here we have matching brackets in both parts. That's key to the next line, which is now to do some more common factoring, because now that we have a common bracket in both parts, that becomes our new common factor, which can be divided out from each part of the expression. If I take away the big bracket from the first part, I'm left with just the 2x squared. And if I take away the common bracket from the second part, divide that out, I'm left with just the minus 3. And now we've done factor by grouping. We've made groups, we've common factored the first part, common factored the second part, and then finally common factor that matching bracket, that common bracket, to get our last expression. Check as always, bracket times 2x squared is 2x squared times bracket, and also bracket times negative 3 is the expression up here, bracket times negative 3. So we know we've done it correctly. Part B, exactly the same thing. You can always start by trying to divide your expression into 2 parts. As it's written already, looking at the first part here, any common factors that can be divided out? Yes, we've got a 2x that can be divided out from the first part. And if I do that, I'm left with 3x plus y. And in the second part as well, I've got a minus and a minus. 5 can be divided out there, so I'll take out a minus 5 and do that division as well. 3x plus y. Now you can check, and I know it's tough with the minus sign there, but minus 5 times 3x is minus 15x. minus 5 times y is minus 5y. That minus does need to be divided out there. Now again, right, after this step we should have matching brackets, which we do. So that is now common and needs to be divided out as a common bracket. So if I divide that out, 3x plus y divided from the first part of the expression leaves you with just the 2x. And divide out the bracket from the second part, I'm left with the minus 5. And now that one's done. Lastly, I've got an expression here that if you look through and try and divide it initially in half the way that it's written, no common letters here, okay? No common A's or B's or X's or Y's. The second half of the expression, same thing, no common A's, B's, X's, Y's. So I know initially now I'm going to have to do this rearranging part, okay? So try and rearrange it so that you've got some common letters, in this case, or letters or numbers, in the first half. For example, I could do AX first, and then put this AY right beside it because I can clearly see I've got common A's there. For the second part, maybe I'm going to put the BX next, and then I'll finish it off with the BY. No need to change signs, okay? We're not going across an equal sign, so we'll just leave all the signs exactly the way they are. We're just rearranging it, that's all. Okay, now if I try to do some factor by grouping here, I'll take my first group. I now have common A's together. I can divide out a common A, leaving x minus y. And in the second part, we can see we've got some common B's. Now, that minus does need to be divided out here as well, and you'll see why in a second. If I divide out the negative b, I'm left with x minus y, and we get the matching brackets that we're looking for, okay? So if I did not divide out the minus sign here, I would not end up with matching brackets. So that minus sign is important to be divided out as a common factor. Check if you'd like to. Minus b times x is negative bx. Minus b times minus y is positive by. So it definitely needs to be divided out. And finally, we have that matching bracket. It can be divided out as a common factor. So divide that out. And we've now finished factor by grouping for this third one. This is not the only rearrangement that can be done here, and I guess I'll leave it as a challenge to you. Try and find another rearrangement here that you can come up with different groups, but still come up with exactly the same answer here at the bottom.